In a quiet suburban neighborhood, order was supposed to be the rule. The lawns were trimmed, the fences painted, and every detail monitored by the homeowners association. But beneath the surface of that tidy community, tension was waiting to break through. A single disagreement, something as small as where a car was parked, was enough to set off a chain of events no one could control. What began as routine enforcement of neighborhood rules slowly turned into something darker: paranoia, intimidation, and the unraveling of power. By the time it reached its breaking point, the battle between a ruthless HOA president and her new neighbor would leave the entire street forever changed. Welcome to Black Community Stories. Make sure you like and subscribe for your top-notch stories. Karen Holloway had ruled over the suburban neighborhood of Briarwood for nearly a decade. As president of the Homeowners Association, her word carried weight. Fines, warnings, and board meetings were her weapons, and she wielded them without hesitation. Most residents had long since learned not to challenge her authority. But that was before Evan Walker moved in. Evan was quiet, polite, and respectful. A black man in his mid-30s, he bought the gray corner house with the wide porch and the maple tree out front. From the very first week, his presence unsettled Karen, not because of anything he did, but because he didn't bend to her rules the way others did. The clash started with something simple: a car. Evan owned two, an older black sedan and a gleaming silver truck. He parked one in his driveway and one at the curb. To any normal neighbor, this wasn't a problem. But to Karen, it was a violation. One humid evening, just before the rain broke, she marched across the street in her pressed blouse and heels. She didn't knock politely. She pounded on his door. When Evan answered, still in his work shirt and with a calm expression, she didn't waste time. "You're not allowed to have two vehicles parked outside at overnight," she barked. "One of them has to go." Evan studied her for a long moment before replying, his voice even. "Ma'am, I'm not breaking any city law. This is my house. My cars are registered, insured, and parked legally, so with respect, you don't get to decide where I park." Karen's face tightened. She wasn't used to resistance. She jabbed a finger toward him. "I'm the HOA president. I make the rules here. If you don't like it, maybe this isn't the neighborhood for you." Evan's jaw flexed. But he didn't back down. Instead, he stepped a little closer, his calmness more unnerving than anger. "With all due respect, you don't get to push me out of my own home. I'm not going anywhere." For a moment, they stood in the doorway, the storm wind whipping Karen's hair, Evan's steady gaze meeting her fiery glare. Then she did something reckless. She raised her hand and slapped him across the face. The sound cracked louder than the thunder overhead. Evan didn't strike back. He only stood there, his lips split, his eyes never leaving hers. That look, silent, steady, would haunt her later that night. Karen spun on her heel and marched away, muttering under her breath about black people and making troubles. But as she stormed back to her house, something shifted inside her. For the first time in years, she felt rattled. Inside, she poured herself a tall glass of wine, her hands trembling. She told herself she was still in control. She was the president. She had the power, and she would make Evan pay for daring to defy her. But as the storm broke and rain hammered her windows, Karen couldn't shake the image of his face, calm, unflinching, watching her. Before we dive in deeply, let us know in the comments what country or which city you're watching this story from. We'd love to know how far this story travels. By morning, Karen had convinced herself the whole confrontation was nothing more than a hiccup. She was in charge. She had dealt with worse. A violation letter would settle things. She typed it up at her kitchen counter, her fingers stabbing at the keys with determination. Notice of violation. Remove second vehicle within 48 hours or face fines. She printed it, sealed it in an envelope, and slipped it into Evan Walker's mailbox just after sunrise. As she returned home, she allowed herself a smug smile. That should send the message. But later that afternoon, when she walked by his house on her usual patrol, both cars were still there. Not only that, Evan was sitting on the porch with a mug of coffee, his posture relaxed, his eyes following her every step. He didn't wave, he didn't smile, he just watched. The silence unnerved her more than shouting would have. Karen quickened her pace, back home, but the heat rose in her chest. He was mocking her, daring her. That evening she brought it up to the HOA board during their weekly meeting. "He's a problem," she said firmly, her nails tapping against the conference table. "If we don't enforce the rules, what's the point of having them?" Some board members nodded, but a few hesitated. One, a middle-aged woman named Denise, finally spoke. "Karen, I don't see how parking 2 cars, both registered and in good condition, hurts the neighborhood. Maybe we should let this one go." Karen's head snapped toward her, eyes flashing. "Let it go. That's exactly how neighborhoods slip into chaos. One person bends the rules, then another, and soon enough we look like a junkyard." The room fell quiet. No one challenged her further, but she noticed the sideways glances. A seed of doubt had been planted, and she hated it. The following nights brought something worse. On her evening walk, a pair of headlights trailed her longer than usual. At the grocery store, she swore she saw Evan 2 aisles away, studying her from behind the shelves. At home, when the wind rattled her shutters, she thought she heard footsteps just outside her window. Each time she looked, nothing. Her grip on control began to slip. She started writing up more violations: trash bins not pulled in on time, lawns half an inch too long, cars parked too close to the curb, and every citation she filed, Evan's cars remained exactly where they were, untouched, unmoved. One Thursday evening, after another restless night, Karen came home to find something waiting on her front step. An envelope. No name, no return address. Her pulse quickened as she tore it open. Inside was a single photograph, grainy, black and white. It showed her standing on Evan's porch, hand raised, caught mid-slap. Her breath hitched. Across the bottom, scrawled in thick black marker, were the words, "Who's the danger now?" The photograph slipped from her hands, fluttering onto the floor. For once, Karen Holloway had no words. Karen spent the night pacing her living room, the photograph lying face down on the coffee table as though turning it over again would summon something worse. She poured herself glass after glass of wine, her muttering broken by sudden bursts of anger. "He thinks he can scare me. He doesn't know who he's dealing with." But the truth gnawed at her. That photo proved someone had been watching, someone close, and Evan was the only one bold enough to throw it in her face. The next morning, she stormed into the HOA office and called for an emergency meeting. The board members arrived groggy, their coffee cups steaming, their faces showing more curiosity than urgency. Karen slapped the photo onto the table. This is what we're dealing with. This man is dangerous. He assaulted me. Look at this proof." Denise, the same board member who had questioned her before, leaned closer, eyebrows knitting. "Karen, this doesn't show him doing anything. It shows you." The room went uncomfortably quiet. A few members shifted in their seats. Karen's face flushed crimson. "You're missing the point. He had someone take this. He's stalking me, watching me, threatening me. Are we going to wait until something worse happens?" But murmurs rippled across the table. Doubt was spreading faster than Karen could contain it. After the meeting, she returned home fuming, her authority crumbling like sand, and yet as she stepped through her front door, her anger gave way to unease. Her curtains were drawn just as she'd left them, but she couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were on her. She closed them tight, locking every window and door. Then she sat at her dining table, staring at the silent street outside. That evening, she called her closest ally on the board, a thin, nervous man named Rick. "You believe me, don't you?" she pressed. "You know what Evan is capable of." Rick hesitated on the other end. "Karen, I'm not sure what to think anymore. Maybe you should let this go before it gets out of hand." "Out of hand?" Her voice cracked. "He's trying to ruin me. Don't you see that?" Rick mumbled an excuse and ended the call, leaving Karen gripping the phone in her shaking hands. 2 nights later, another envelope appeared. This one was thicker. Her stomach knotted as she carried it inside, her palms slick with sweat. She ripped it open and felt her breath catch. Inside were multiple photos. One of her yelling at Denise in last week's meeting, another of her pacing by her living room window late at night, and one, her chest tightened, of her asleep in bed, the covers pulled to her chin, her mouth slightly open. Her knees buckled, and she dropped the stack onto the carpet. Whoever was behind this wasn't just watching her. They had been inside her house. Karen's hands shook as she fumbled for her phone, dialing 911. But halfway through the number, she froze. What would she say? That her new neighbor parked 2 cars, and now she was losing her mind over it? That someone left photos, but she had no proof it was him? She lowered the phone slowly, her pulse thudding in her ears. For the first time, Karen Holloway wondered if she was already trapped in a game she couldn't win. Karen barely slept. Every sound inside the house jolted her awake. Every shadow cast by headlights sent her running to the window. By sunrise, her face looked drawn, her eyes rimmed red. She skipped her morning routine and instead marched straight across the street, fury burning hotter than fear. She banged on Evan's door. "I know it's you," she shouted. "You think you can break into my home? You think you can terrorize me?" The door opened slowly. Evan stood there in sweatpants and a plain t-shirt, a mug of coffee in his hand. He looked tired, but calm, far too calm. "Karen," he said evenly, "you need to stop." "Stop?" She almost laughed, a sharp cracking sound. "You broke into my house. You're spying on me." Evan shook his head. "No. What you're feeling right now, it's the weight of your own choices. You've turned this entire neighborhood against you, and now you're looking for someone else to blame." The words stung. She tried to fire back, but something in his eyes silenced her. Not fear, not guilt, just that maddening, steady calm. She stepped back, hands trembling, and hissed, "This isn't over." Neighbors peeked out from their windows, watching the scene unfold. Karen's cheeks burned as she caught Denise on her porch across the street, whispering something to another resident. Karen felt the shift. The power she once held so easily was slipping, replaced by whispers, suspicion, and doubt. That evening, Karen sat at her desk, writing up a formal case against Evan. Noise complaints, fabricated witness accounts, anything she could muster. If the board wouldn't stand with her, she'd bury him in paperwork until he broke. But halfway through, she noticed something odd. The blinds to her office window, ones she swore she had closed earlier, were slightly open, just enough for someone to see in. Her breath caught. She grabbed the phone and called Rick. "Someone's outside my house," she whispered. "I think it's him." "Karen, slow down. Did you see him?" "I don't have to. I know it's him. He's been in my house, Rick. He left photos of me sleeping." Rick sighed heavily on the other end. "Karen, maybe you should talk to someone about the stress, about all this." Her grip tightened on the phone. "You think I'm crazy, don't you?" Rick's silence was answer enough. That night, the storm returned. Wind howled, rain hammered her windows. Karen sat in the dark with a kitchen knife clutched in her hand, her body jerking at every creak of the house. Around midnight, she heard it, a faint tap-tap-tap on her back window. She jumped to her feet, heart racing, and yanked the curtain open. Nothing but the storm, no one outside. But when she turned back to the kitchen, her blood turned cold. Another envelope sat on the table. She hadn't heard the door. She hadn't heard a thing. Yet it was there, waiting for her. Her hands shook as she reached for it, the sound of the storm drowning out her ragged breathing. Karen's fingers trembled as they brushed the envelope on her kitchen table. She hadn't heard anyone enter. The locks were still bolted, yet the envelope lay there, mocking her. The storm rattled the house, but the silence inside was louder. She tore it open with shaking hands. Inside was a single photograph. Her, standing in the kitchen at this very moment, knife clutched in her fist, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. The photo was seconds old. Karen staggered back, her breath short and shallow. "No, no, no." The knife slipped from her hand and clattered on the tile. She ran to the front door, yanking it open, rain slamming against her face. Across the street, Evan's porch light glowed faintly. He was there, sitting calmly in a chair, watching her through the downpour. Something inside her snapped. She stormed across the road, water soaking through her clothes, her hair plastered to her forehead. She didn't care if the neighbors were watching. She didn't care if she looked unhinged. She needed this to end. She charged up Evan's steps, pounding on his door. "Come out! Enough of this! You want me gone? You want to scare me? Face me!" The door creaked open. Evan stood there, calm as ever, rain dripping onto his bare feet. He didn't flinch. Karen's chest heaved. "You've been in my house. You've been watching me. Admit it." Evan leaned casually against the frame. His voice was soft, steady, cutting through the roar of the storm. "You don't need me to admit anything, Karen. You already know the truth." Her throat went dry. "What truth?" He stepped closer, his eyes locked on hers. "The truth is that you've built your life on control. But control isn't real. It's a story you told yourself. And now, everyone sees the real you." She shook her head violently, rain spraying. "You think you can ruin me? You think you can?" Evan interrupted, his voice low, almost pitying. "I don't have to ruin you. You're doing it yourself. Every neighbor has seen your outbursts. Every board member has seen you twist rules to your advantage. And soon, they'll all see how far you've really fallen. Karen's breath came in the sharp gasps. She lunged forward, jabbing a finger in his face. "You won't get away with this. I'll have you removed from this neighborhood if it's the last thing I do." For the first time, Evan's calm expression shifted into something else. Not anger, not fear, but finality. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You're right about one thing, Karen. It is the last thing you'll do." Before she could react, Evan stepped back and the porch light flicked off, plunging her into darkness. Karen spun wildly, rain pouring into her eyes, heart pounding in her throat. She stumbled back into the street, screaming his name, but her voice was swallowed by thunder. The next morning, Briarwood residents gathered as word spread. Karen Holloway's house stood eerily still. The blinds were drawn. The door was locked from the inside. But Karen was gone. No signs of forced entry, no signs of a struggle. Just silence. When the police arrived, they found one thing out of place. On Karen's dining table, in the exact spot where the last envelope had been, sat her HOA gavel, snapped clean in two. Beside it lay a final photograph. It showed Karen the night before, standing in the storm, her face twisted in rage as she screamed at Evan's porch. Only this time, Evan wasn't in the frame. The chair had been empty. The neighborhood buzzed with rumors. Some whispered that Karen finally broke under the pressure and fled town. Others swore Evan knew more than he let on, but Evan himself remained silent, mowing his lawn, sipping coffee on his porch, 2 cars gleaming in the driveway. And on quiet nights, when the wind swept through the cul-de-sac, some neighbors swore they could still hear Karen's voice, sharp and desperate, carried on the storm. But in Briarwood, one thing was certain. The reign of Karen Holloway was over. The end. Please like and subscribe for more rich stories like this. Comment below. Also, if you really loved this video and want to support the channel directly, you can hit that super thanks button below.